The sun of Nareen 5 was not like the sun of Earth. It was colder, weaker, and pale blue in color. Every evening, when the strange light touched the broken buildings of the old city, one could see a small figure standing alone near the corner of an abandoned street. She stood there every day, quiet, still, and waiting. Her name was Lyra. She was not human. Her skin had a faint silver glow, and her eyes were bright violet like stars trapped in glass. Her people once lived proudly in the shining towers of Nareen 5, but now those towers were broken skeletons covered in dust. The war had ended long ago, yet its scars still whispered in the wind. Lyra stood there because of a promise. A human had made it. 500 days ago, during the last battle of the Human Alliance War, a soldier named Captain Ethan Cole had saved her life. He was different from the other humans, kind, gentle, and brave. When everyone else saw her as an enemy, he had offered his hand. She remembered that day clearly, the sky on fire, the ground shaking, and the sound of ships exploding above the city. Ethan had pulled her out of the ruins, his suit cracked, his face bleeding, but his smile steady. "You'll live," he had said, "and when the stars are safe again, I'll come back for you." Then he was gone. Now every day Lyra came back to the same corner, the place where he had left. The wind blew through her hair, carrying the sound of machines from far away. Sometimes she talked to the empty air as if he could still hear her. "Humans keep promises," she whispered softly. "You will come back." The locals had noticed her long ago. The traders, scavengers, and survivors who passed by called her the waiting ghost. Some believed she was crazy. Others said she was dangerous. A few pitied her, but no one dared to come close. Only a small drone floating high above ever watched her closely. It recorded her face every evening as she stood under the flickering streetlight. Her expression never changed, calm, patient, and sad. On the 500th day, something strange happened. The blue sun had just begun to set when the air suddenly shimmered. The old communicator on Lyra's wrist, a small black device given to her by Ethan, made a faint sound. It had been silent for months. Lyra froze. The screen flickered weakly, showing a short burst of static and then a single pulse of light, a signal. Her heart began to race. She pressed the small button. The communicator hissed with static again, then stopped. A moment of silence followed, and then a word. "Wait." Her eyes widened. It was faint, broken, but it was real. She replayed it again and again. The same word repeated in the same deep human voice she could never forget. Wait. Was it really him, or just an echo from a dying machine? Lyra's hands shook. She looked up at the sky. The stars had begun to appear cold and distant. She knew most of them were empty now, dead worlds after the war. But maybe one of those stars still had Ethan alive. Behind her, the drone that had been watching her sent its footage to a control room far away. Inside that dark room, a group of human soldiers stared at the screen in silence. The face of the alien girl appeared again, her eyes glowing softly in the twilight. A man with a scar across his cheek leaned forward. "That can't be," he whispered. "She's still waiting?" "Who is she?" another soldier asked. The man's voice was quiet. "She's the reason Captain Cole went missing." Outside on the lonely streets of Nareen 5, Lyra continued to stand. She pressed the communicator to her chest, feeling its weak hum against her heart. "I will wait," she said softly, "even if it takes 1,000 days. The wind rose again, carrying dust and whispers through the ruins. Somewhere far above the clouds, a faint human signal blinked from the outer orbit, so weak that most scanners ignored it. But if one looked closely, it formed a pattern. 3 short pulses. 2 long ones. 1 short again. It was an old Earth code, a call for help. Lyra didn't know that yet. She just stood quietly, looking at the same stars where Ethan had once pointed and said, "That's where Earth is." She smiled faintly, tears shining in her violet eyes. For her, every day was the same, a new beginning of the same waiting. But tonight the stars above Nareen 5 blinked differently. They seemed to whisper that something, somewhere, was finally moving and far away. Beyond the silent planets, someone or something had just remembered the promise. The night on Nareen 5 was quiet, too quiet. The wind had stopped, the lights of the ruined city flickered weakly, and Lyra sat under the same broken streetlight, holding the communicator in her hands like it was the most precious thing in the world. For days after the signal, she had tried to call again. Nothing came back. Only that one word still echoed in her mind. Wait, it could have been a glitch. It could have been a dream. But her heart refused to believe that. It had to be him, Ethan Cole, the human who once promised he would return. Lyra closed her eyes and remembered the first time she met him. It was during the last days of the war when the humans and her people, the Narini, fought for control of the same sky. She had been trapped under a fallen wall, her leg bleeding, surrounded by fire. A human soldier appeared, shouting orders, dragging her out of the smoke. She had been terrified. Humans were enemies then, but this one didn't shoot. He carried her on his back even while the battle raged behind them. When she asked him why, he smiled and said, "Because you were scared. And I don't want fear to win today." That memory burned bright inside her like a star that never faded. Now, 500 days later, she sat alone with that same memory, the only thing that made the long silence bearable. Suddenly, the communicator buzzed again. Lyra jumped. Her heart skipped. The small screen glowed faintly blue, then lines of strange symbols appeared. It wasn't a voice this time. It was a code. She didn't understand human codes well, but Ethan had once taught her a few patterns. "If you ever see these lines," he had said, "it means someone's trying to talk through deep space interference." Her fingers trembled as she copied the shapes into her old datapad. The words formed slowly. EC alive, beacon active. Orbit unstable, keep signal open. Her eyes widened. It was him. It had to be. But how could he still be alive? She looked up at the sky again. Somewhere beyond the thin clouds, an old human satellite still circled the planet. Maybe Ethan had found a way to send signals from there. Maybe he was trapped. Lyra's pulse quickened. She wanted to reach him, but she had no ship, no energy, no help. Narine 5 was broken, and the few who survived only cared about scavenging. Still, she had to try. She began walking through the dark streets, heading for the old radio towers that once connected the planet to the human fleet. Her boots crunched over glass and dust. Strange blue plants had grown through cracks in the concrete. The silence felt heavier with every step. When she reached the tower, she found it half destroyed, its top twisted like a broken spine. She climbed the rusty stairs carefully, her heart pounding. At the control panel, the lights were dead, but she remembered Ethan's words. Machines are like people. They just need a reason to start again. So she worked, all night, rewiring, connecting power cells and whispering his name every few minutes as if it gave her strength. By dawn, the tower hummed weakly. The signal light blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. She pressed the send button and spoke softly. "Ethan, I am here." I waited. The transmitter hissed with static, then silence. She tried again. "Ethan Cole, this is Lyra. I got your signal, please." Answer, no reply. Then faintly, the static shifted. A low voice, broken and full of static, whispered through. "Lyra, stay away. Not safe." Her heart froze. It was him. She could feel it in every word. "Ethan, where are you?" She shouted, tears filling her eyes. But the signal cut off, leaving only a long, cold silence. Lyra stared at the communicator, refusing to move. Her mind raced. Not safe. What did that mean? Was someone after him? Or after her? Behind her, in the shadows of the ruins, a small red light blinked. Someone or something was watching her from afar. She didn't see it, but the watchers were not human. They were scavengers from the outer colonies, mercenaries who hunted for old human technology. To them, Lyra was a target. The communicator she carried was worth a fortune. Their leader grinned as he zoomed in on her glowing wristband. "There it is," he said. "The last human signal key. Get the alien alive." Lyra stood under the rising blue sun, unaware that danger had already found her. She looked once more at the sky, clutching the communicator close to her chest. "Don't worry, Ethan," she whispered. "I'm not afraid." In the distance, thunder rolled. But it wasn't thunder. It was engines. The hunters were coming. And as the wind began to rise again, the communicator blinked one last message before fading out. "Wait for me." Lyra smiled softly. For her, that was enough. Hope was alive again, and so was the promise. The next morning on Narine 5 began with silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the planet itself is holding its breath. The blue sun rose slowly, its light falling over broken towers, shattered domes, and the lonely streets below. Lyra walked through the dust-covered ruins with the communicator held close to her chest. Every few seconds she glanced at the screen, hoping for another signal. But it stayed dark and cold. She whispered, "Come back, Ethan. Please." The message she had heard last night kept echoing in her mind. Stay away. Not safe. Those words were not just warning her. They were filled with fear. Ethan was afraid for her. That meant he was alive, but in danger. Lyra didn't care. She had waited 500 days already. What was danger compared to that? She had to find him. As she moved deeper into the old city, the air began to change. The wind carried strange noises, metal footsteps, faint voices, a sound like engines far away. The scavenger hunters were out there, following her trail. Lyra didn't know it yet. At the edge of the ruins, she found a crater, a large black circle burned deep into the ground. Pieces of metal lay scattered everywhere, half buried in dust. On one of them, she saw a familiar mark, EC. Ethan Cole's initials. Her breath caught. She dropped to her knees and touched the metal plate. It was part of a human ship, old, damaged, and full of bullet holes. The edges were melted, as if it had fallen from orbit. She followed the debris step by step through the cracked ground. Each piece told a story: a broken engine, a shattered helmet, a blood-stained glove. Then, near the heart of the crater, she found something small and silver lying in the dust. A metal feather. Her eyes filled with tears. She remembered it perfectly. It was the charm that hung from Ethan's uniform. He once told her it came from Earth's first starship, a symbol of freedom. "If I ever lose this," he'd said, "it means I found something worth fighting for." Lyra's hands shook as she picked it up. "You came back," she whispered. "You really came back." Nearby, the scavengers had arrived. Hidden among the ruins, their leader watched her through a scope. His name was Kale, a tall, scarred alien with metallic implants across his face. "There she is," he muttered. "And she's found the crash site." One of his men asked, "Do we move in?" Kyle smiled coldly. "Not yet. Let her do the hard work. When she finds what we want, we'll take it from her." The communicator on Lyra's wrist blinked again. A weak signal came alive, a voice message broken by static. She pressed play. "Ethan Cole. Mission failed. Ship down. Must activate beacon manually. If anyone hears this, tell Lyra I kept my word." Gunfire crackled through the recording, followed by silence. Lyra froze, her knees weakened. "No, please no." She played it again. The same ending. The same final sound of gunfire. Tears rolled down her face as she held the communicator close. "You didn't break your word, Ethan," she whispered. "You tried." But in her heart, pain grew like a shadow. Had he died trying to return? Was she waiting for a ghost? The blue wind howled through the ruins, tossing dust into the air. She fell to her knees, clutching the metal feather, her tears falling onto the ground. For a moment, she thought of giving up, to leave this dead planet, to forget everything, to stop waiting. But then, something inside her refused. Ethan had fought for her. He had believed in her when everyone else saw her as an enemy. He didn't give up, and neither would she. Lyra stood, wiping her tears. She looked toward the horizon where a faint light flickered in the distance, the remains of an old human outpost. Maybe answers were there. Maybe the beacon Ethan mentioned still worked. She took a deep breath and began walking. Behind her, Kale and his men followed silently. "She's heading for the outpost," one whispered. Kale grinned. "Perfect. That's where the beacon core is. Once she powers it up, we'll have the coordinates to Earth." None of them noticed the small human drone floating high above, watching them all. Its lens zoomed in on Lyra's face, recording her every step. The image streamed to an unknown receiver in orbit, and far away, a weak voice whispered through the static, "Lyra, don't stop." By the time night came, Lyra reached the outpost. It was silent, empty, and filled with rusting machines. She placed the metal feather on the console and powered up the system. The lights flickered weakly, revealing human writing on the wall. "We will return. No promise is forgotten." Lyra smiled through her tears. The words gave her strength again. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky. The hunters were closing in, their ships dark and silent. The promise wasn't broken yet, but the storm was coming, and Lyra, the alien girl who waited 500 days, was about to learn that some promises are kept with blood and fire. The night sky above Nareen 5 burned with streaks of blue lightning. Storm clouds rolled over the dead city, hiding the stars Lyra once watched every night. She stood inside the old human outpost, her hands shaking as she worked on the control panel. Sparks jumped from broken wires, lighting her silver skin in flashes of blue and white. The message she found on the wall still echoed in her heart. "We will return. No promise is forgotten." Those words gave her new strength. Ethan's last signal had spoken of a beacon, a machine strong enough to send a message across space. If she could fix it, maybe she could reach him again, or at least learn what happened to him. Lyra brushed her hair from her face, breathing hard. The air inside the outpost smelled like burnt metal and dust. Her fingers moved quickly over the old console, remembering the things Ethan once taught her. He had always said, "A machine isn't dead until you stop believing it can work." So she didn't stop. Outside, hidden among the ruins, the scavenger hunters waited. Their ships hovered low, silent and dark, their eyes glowing faint red through the storm. Their leader, Kale, watched her from behind a cracked visor. "She's smarter than she looks," he muttered. "Already powering the beacon system." One of his men asked, "Why do we need her alive? Easier if we take the communicator and leave." Kale turned his head slowly. "You fool. Only she has the human key. Without her, the beacon won't open. That signal she's calling, that's not just a message. It's a map. To Earth." The scavenger smiled greedily. "Earth, the lost world. Riches beyond measure." Kale nodded. "Exactly. So we wait. Let her do the hard work." Inside, the beacon chamber came alive with a low hum. Faint lights crawled across the walls like veins waking from sleep. Lyra stepped back, eyes wide with awe. She didn't know what she had awakened, but she could feel the energy, the same kind Ethan's communicator once carried. A small hologram flickered above the console. It showed an image of the human flag and a message in broken English. "Beacon core offline. Manual key required." Lyra reached for her wrist communicator. Maybe it could act as the key. The moment she connected it, the beacon began to pulse with light. For the first time in 500 days, the outpost glowed like it once did during the golden age of humans. Lyra smiled faintly. "You see, Ethan? I found it." She didn't know that her signal was now flashing across the planet, a bright pulse seen even from orbit. Kale's scanners beeped. He grinned. "There it is. The beacon's alive. Move in." Engines roared as scavenger ships lifted through the smoke. The storm crackled with lightning as they raced toward the outpost. Lyra heard the thunder and looked up. The sound was too sharp, too mechanical. Her instincts screamed. She ran to the window and saw the dark shapes descending fast. Her heart pounded. She had been found. Lyra grabbed the communicator, disconnected it from the console, and sprinted toward the back exit. But before she could reach the door, explosions shook the ground. Dust filled the air. Kale's voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "Alien girl, hand over the device and maybe we'll let you live." Lyra's eyes blazed with anger. "This is not yours," she shouted back. "It's human." Kale laughed. "Humans are dead, little ghost. Their promises mean nothing now." Lyra's voice trembled, but her words were strong. "No, he will come back." She ran into the storm, lightning flashing around her. The beacon still pulsed behind her like a beating heart. The scavengers chased her through the ruins, firing plasma bolts that exploded against the walls. Lyra ducked behind a wrecked transport, breathing hard. Rain poured down, washing the dust from her face. She opened the communicator, its signal light still blinking. "Ethan," she whispered, "I need you." For a moment, only static answered. Then a faint sound came. A voice, distant and weak. "Lyra. Beacon. Don't let them take it. Trust the light." Her eyes widened. It was him. The signal came from orbit, from the old human station still circling Nareen 5. She looked up through the rain. A small light flashed among the storm clouds. Ethan was alive. But if the scavengers got to the beacon first, they could destroy everything he fought for. Lyra stood up, clutching the communicator tightly. Her fear turned into fire. "I won't let them win," she said softly. As Kale's men closed in, she sprinted back toward the outpost. Plasma blasts hit the walls around her, but she kept running. She reached the main console and hit the power core manually. The beacon began to glow brighter, its light reaching through the storm, a beam shining straight into the sky. Kale shouted, "No, she's activating it." The beam pierced the clouds, connecting with the orbiting station far above. The scavengers shielded their eyes as the ground trembled. Lyra stood in the center of the light, soaked and trembling but unbroken. Somewhere in orbit, a human voice whispered through static, stronger this time. "Lyra, hold on. I'm coming," the sky answered with thunder. The storm had begun, and so had the return of a promise. The storm over Nareen 5 raged like a wounded beast. Lightning tore across the black clouds and the ground trembled under the power of the awakened beacon. The white-blue beam shot into the heavens, cutting through the darkness. Reaching toward the stars, Lyra stood in the center of it, rain falling hard against her face, the communicator glowing faintly in her hands. Her heart was racing, but not from fear and from hope. For the first time in 500 days, she felt it again. He was near. She looked up into the storm and whispered, "Ethan, if you can hear me." "I'm still waiting." The beam pulsed once, twice, and suddenly the communicator vibrated. Static filled the air, followed by a broken voice. "Lyra, this is Cole. Beacon locked. I'm coming down." Her eyes filled with tears. It was him. His voice, older, rougher, but alive. "Ethan, you're alive!" she shouted through the storm, but the reply came only in short bursts. "Not safe. Hostiles. Protect the beacon." Then silence. The scavengers had recovered from the blast. Their ships circled above like metal vultures, firing red bolts at the base of the beacon. Kale's voice thundered through his speakers. "Destroy the outpost. Leave no trace." Lyra ran for cover as explosions rocked the ground. The ancient structures crumbled around her. Sparks and fire filled the air, but the beacon still glowed strong. And in that light, she saw something moving above the clouds, a shape, burning bright like a falling star. A human dropship. Inside the descending craft, Captain Ethan Cole gripped the controls with bleeding hands. The small ship shook violently, alarms screaming. His armor was damaged, his oxygen low, but his eyes were full of determination. "Hold together, old friend," he muttered to the ship. "Just one more landing." He looked at the old photo taped to the console, a silver-skinned girl with violet eyes standing beside him, smiling shyly. He whispered, "I told you I'd come back." Lyra watched in awe as the dropship broke through the clouds, trailing smoke. It crashed hard into the desert outside the ruins. She didn't hesitate. She ran through fire and falling debris, clutching the communicator close to her chest. Behind her, Kale saw the crash. His eyes widened. That's a human craft. After it. His men jumped onto speeders, engines roaring. Lyra reached the wreck first. The ship was torn open, smoke hissing from its sides. She climbed through the debris, calling out, "Ethan! Ethan, where are you?" A hand reached out through the smoke, rough, scarred, but still warm. "Lyra." She froze. The voice, the touch, when it was real. She pulled away a broken panel and saw him. Older, his face marked by battle, his armor cracked, but his eyes still kind. "You came back," she whispered, trembling. He smiled weakly. "Told you I would. Didn't think it would take this long." Lyra laughed through her tears and helped him stand. For a brief moment, the world felt whole again. But the sound of approaching engines broke the peace. The scavengers were closing in. Ethan looked toward the beacon. We need to finish what I started. That light up there, it's not just a signal. It's a call to every survivor out there. If they see it, they'll know Earth is alive. Lyra nodded. Then we protect it. The scavenger ships appeared over the ridge, red lights glowing in the rain. Cale stepped forward, aiming his weapon. You're the human everyone's whispering about. You should have stayed dead. Ethan aimed his rifle. And missed this reunion? Not a chance. The storm exploded around them. Bolts of plasma lit the sky as humans and aliens fought side by side once more, just like they did long ago. Lyra moved fast, using her small frame to dodge enemy fire. Ethan covered her, firing precise shots, protecting her every step. For a moment, it felt like the war had returned, but this time the two sides were clear. Those who believed in promises, and those who didn't. Cale charged through the chaos, his armor glowing red. He swung a heavy blade at Lyra, but she blocked it with a metal pipe, sparks flying. You fight for ghosts, Cale shouted. Lyra's voice rose through the rain. I fight for the one who kept his word. Ethan fired, hitting Cale's armor and sending him crashing backward. The scavengers began to retreat, their ships burning and broken. The beacon roared to full power, its light reaching beyond the clouds, far into the dark of space. Ethan staggered, holding his bleeding side. It's done. The message is sent. Lyra caught him before he fell. You're hurt. Stay with me. He smiled faintly. I'm not going anywhere. But if the beacon overloads, someone has to stay to stabilize it. No, she said firmly, tears in her eyes. We do it together. The beacon's pulse grew stronger, shaking the ground. Ethan looked at her and nodded. Together. They ran toward the control chamber as the storm above began to clear. The light from the beacon spread across the horizon, brighter than the sun itself. For a second, everything was silent. Just two figures standing hand in hand against a wall of light. From orbit, satellites picked up the signal, a clear human transmission repeating through space. Peace is possible. We are still here. And in that message was a simple code hidden beneath the static. One Lyra had waited 500 days to hear. I kept my promise. Smoke drifted across the ruins of Nareen 5 like ghosts of the old war. The storm had passed, but the ground still trembled with the aftershocks of the beacon's awakening. The sky was no longer blue. It glowed with silver light from the tower that pierced the heavens. Lyra knelt beside Ethan, helping him stand. His armor was cracked, his face bruised, but his eyes were alive. After 500 days, the impossible had happened. The human had returned. She whispered softly, You came back. He smiled faintly, blood at the corner of his lip. Took a while. Traffic was bad. Lyra laughed weakly through her tears. The sound was small but real. Behind them, the beacon pulsed again, its light flashing faster. Ethan looked at it, worry in his eyes. It's unstable. The energy's building too fast. If it overloads, it'll destroy the whole region. Then we shut it down, Lyra said quickly. Ethan shook his head. No, if we shut it down now, the signal dies. And Earth won't know we made it. She stared at him. So what do we do? He looked up toward the sky, where the beam reached into orbit. We finish what we started. The main control's in the old human station above us. I can remote link the system from there and stabilize it. Lyra frowned. But how will we get there? The station's dead. Ethan gave her a tired grin. Not dead. Just sleeping. He reached for the communicator on her wrist, the same one he gave her long ago. This still works. It carries my command codes. With it, I can wake the station. Lyra looked at the glowing device, then at him. You planned this. Even back then. Ethan chuckled softly. Let's just say I believe in backup plans. And in people who wait. They moved through the ruins together, side by side. Every step felt heavy but full of meaning. Around them, the stormlight shimmered on the broken metal and shattered glass. The scavengers were gone, then scattered or dead. For the first time in years, Nareen 5 was silent. When they reached the old landing platform, Ethan activated his emergency transmitter. The sky answered with a distant rumble, and from the clouds a transport pod descended slowly, its hull scarred with time. Lyra stared in wonder. You kept this? Yeah, Ethan said with a grin. Didn't think I'd need it for a rescue mission, though. They climbed inside. The cockpit was small, filled with blinking lights and old photographs taped to the panels. Human cities, forests, oceans. Lyra touched one picture carefully. This is your world? She asked quietly. Ethan nodded. It was, maybe it still is. If the signal reaches them, they'll know we survived out here, and they'll come. Lyra smiled faintly. Then we'll wait for them. Together. The engines roared to life, lifting them off the ground. As they rose through the dark clouds, the surface of Nareen 5 fell away beneath them. A wasteland bathed in silver light. For Lyra, it was her first time seeing her world from above. For Ethan, it was like coming home to a promise that refused to die. The pod docked with the orbiting station, the last remnant of the old human fleet. The corridors were dark, cold, and silent. Dust floated in zero gravity like drifting snow. Ethan led the way, using his flashlight to guide them. Haven't been here since the war, he murmured. Feels like walking through memories. They reached the control room. Broken screens lined the walls, their glass cracked. In the center was the main console, the heart of the beacon network. Ethan connected the communicator to it. The system came alive, lights flickering weakly. Signals steady, he said, but the power core's overheating. Someone has to stay and regulate it manually. Lyra's eyes widened. Then we both stay. He looked at her, shaking his head. No, you'll go back to the surface, no. She shouted, her voice trembling. You always try to protect everyone else. But you made a promise, and to come back, not to die again. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then smiled sadly. Lyra, I didn't survive this long to break my word now. If I stay, you live. If I leave, we both die. Simple math, tears filled her violet eyes. Humans and their math, she whispered. He laughed softly. We're not that smart, we just care too much. Lyra took his hand, her voice breaking. Then let me care too. For a moment neither spoke. The beacon light shone through the station windows, painting their faces in silver glow. Finally, Ethan placed the metal feather, his old charm, into her hand. Keep this, he said. It belongs to both of us now. Lyra shook her head. No, you keep it, he smiled. I already did. You're my feather now, the thing I found worth fighting for. As the alarm lights began to flash red, Ethan stepped toward the console. Lyra stood frozen, her heart breaking. He looked back at her one last time. When the stars shine brighter, remember me there. The doors sealed before she could reach him. She screamed his name, pounding against the glass. Through the barrier, she saw him connect the final circuit. The beacon flared once more, brighter than ever before. From the surface, the people of Nareen 5 looked up and saw the entire sky glowing white. The signal reached beyond the stars, carrying a message of hope, courage, and love. In that light, the world finally remembered the man who returned, not just to keep his promise, but to keep humanity alive in the heart of one alien girl. The beacon light flooded the blackness of space, so bright it painted every cloud of Nareen 5 in silver fire. From the surface, it looked like a second sun had been born, a son born from a promise kept. Lyra stood in the docking bay of the orbiting station, her face lit by the storm of light outside. The floor shook beneath her boots. The hum of the engines grew louder with every passing second. Ethan was gone, sealed behind the control doors, holding the unstable core together with what remained of his strength. Through the window, Lyra could still see the faint outline of his figure surrounded by sparks and light. He had smiled at her before the glass darkened. That same warm, steady smile she had seen the day he first saved her life. She pressed her hand to the cold window. You promised you'd come back. And you did, she whispered, voice trembling. But please don't leave again. No answer came. Only the deep rumble of the reactor. Inside the control chamber, Ethan's armor was melting under the heat. His system screamed warnings, oxygen low, pressure unstable, heart rate critical. But he stayed focused. His fingers danced across the controls, rerouting the last of the power into the beacon uplink. Come on, he muttered through gritted teeth. Hold together. Just a little longer. He glanced at the small screen beside him. Lyra's image flickered there from the security feed. She was still standing near the window, refusing to leave. He smiled faintly. Stubborn as ever. With a deep breath, he whispered into the comm channel, his voice rough but calm. Lyra, listen. You've got to get back to the pod. Once the beacon finishes the pulse, this place will go critical. You need to live. You hear me? Her voice came back full of tears. No, not without you. He closed his eyes. You already have me. You always did. The beacon flared again, a massive burst of light tearing through the clouds below. The signal raced across the void, past broken satellites, forgotten stations, and dead worlds. Somewhere far away, on the edge of known space, a human outpost caught the signal. The old computers blinked to life for the first time in centuries. On the screen appeared a message: Beacon from Noreen 5, humans alive. Allies found. Hope endures, the operator whispered in disbelief. After all this time, they did it. Back on the station, alarms blared. The structure began to break apart, pieces of metal floating into the void. Lyra ran toward the control doors, pounding with all her strength. Ethan, please, the signal is sent. Come out. For a heartbeat, the lights dimmed. Then the door slid open just a crack, enough for her to see him one last time. He stood in the center of the glowing chamber, surrounded by swirling blue light. His helmet was off, his face calm despite the chaos around him. He met her eyes. The stars remember, Lyra. Don't let them forget. Then the blast came, white and silent. When Lyra woke, she was drifting in space. The emergency pod's lights flickered above her. The station was gone, nothing but fragments glowing in the distance. The beacon tower below still shone, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Her communicator blinked weakly. She raised it to her ear. Static filled the air, and then a faint voice like an echo from a dream. Told you. I'd come back. Tears ran down her face. She smiled softly. Yes, Ethan, you did. The pod began its slow descent toward the surface of Noreen 5. The world below looked peaceful now, bathed in the silver glow of the beacon. When she landed, the storm had passed completely. The skies were clear, full of stars. For the first time in years, the city felt alive again. Lights flickering in the ruins, people emerging from hiding, drawn to the signal of hope. Lyra walked back to the same street corner where it had all begun. The air was cool, quiet. She stood there, holding the metal feather Ethan had left her. It shimmered softly in the starlight. 500 days, she whispered. And you kept your word. She looked up at the stars, so many, so bright. Somewhere among them, she believed his spirit watched her, smiling that same steady smile. Years later, travelers came to Noreen 5, human explorers and alien settlers alike. They found a city slowly being rebuilt, and in the middle of it, a statue standing under a restored streetlight. It showed a tall human soldier in cracked armor and a small silver-skinned alien girl beside him, both facing the stars. At the base of the statue, carved in both human and Norini language, were the words, "She waited 500 days. He kept his promise." And above those words, in small, simple letters, another line glowed softly in the silver light. When stars remember, so does love. The beacon still shines over Noreen 5, a light that never fades. And sometimes when the wind is quiet and the night is clear, people say they can hear a voice in the static of the sky, whispering gently, "Wait for me." And somewhere beyond the stars, a promise still echoes.